Right then, an explanation on why people can't see racism. Now, this is going to be an interesting perspective. When you have a biased opinion, it's very difficult for anyone to change that perspective. If I was told to believe in God, me being a non-believer, that's a non-believer of any sort of Christian God, for someone to try and get me to believe in that, they would have to do something very good. They'd have to sell me a story based on experience from them, based on some sort of scientific evidence, and it's going to be very difficult to do. Now, I don't have a problem with trying to convince them my beliefs. I don't have a problem trying to convince them that there's probably an alternative that I can explain with more rationale and logic. However, I would just be doing what they try to do, which is explain a belief system that I can't get my head round. So it's very understandable they're not going to get their head round mine, even if I provide more evidence than they do. Logically, they just won't change opinion. When it comes to racism, now there is certainly some racism in the world that exists. It's clear as day. But there's also a lot of unconscious racism that's accidentally actually being interpreted as racism. There's lots of actual racism from black people to white people that goes unconsciously sort of swept under the carpet, and mainly because white people don't have a problem with it. And I don't say that as a white privileged guy backing all white people up and saying it's okay to be racist. I understand racism very clear. Racism is just being unconscious. It's being a fool. There's a difference between a joke that is a stereotypical joke of putting somebody in a box which makes people laugh, to being, I hate this person because of their race, their ethnic group. I don't believe that anybody out there can go against their biased belief system. So black people can only ever see racism even when it's not there, and they also are unconscious to how much racism they project onto their opposite race that they project are racist to them. A good example to try and get you to understand, because any type of talk like this that doesn't just come out and says Black Lives Matter is right when it's not right, it's an organisation that's just pure propaganda, completely tricking loads of black people into producing and providing money for white people. It's ridiculous, but if you're not willing to do the research, you're just going to see that as an unconscious snipe at racism when it's not. But to understand this perspective, I want to give you an example of something that is really, really badly racist towards white people, and no one cares or brings it up. And that is the film that is still currently being shown on Netflix called White Chicks. White Chicks is a classic, funny, hilarious, stereotypical comedy of two black cops who end up painting their faces white, dressing like two white privileged women, stereotypical jokes with chihuahuas and clothes and designer clothes, and being chased by a black guy for the whole programme. Very, very hilariously funny. But the reason why this is racist is if you changed and did the projection of the opposite in the other race. If two white cops provided a show where they made stereotype jokes black-faced, it wouldn't be shown or aired on Netflix. It wouldn't. So we see that there's unconscious racism there. Now, what is the difference between the two films? By the way, these two films haven't been made, or they probably were made in the 50s and 60s. But why isn't this highlighted? And I think it's because, one, the white privileged person now is completely suppressed to say anything. There's not a chance in the world that you will ever see a white person win a case in court where people have been racist to them. In fact, racism by white people isn't brought up. It's not because it doesn't happen. Of course it happens. I know that there's black people and Asian people watching this now who absolutely hate white privileged people. You hate our women, you hate our men. It's that simple. You hate everything we stand for, you hate our history, you hate what you believe that our ancestors did to you. And I say believe as in we didn't carry out those actions. We had grandparents that used the word darkie because that was part of the language. We can't help that today. We need to call a conscious truce, a clever conscious truce that racism will no longer exist as long as you drop that bias and perspective you see. To realise that white chicks is completely racist. Now, I'm not saying that you need to find blackfacing funny. I'm not saying that you need to allow us to do what you do because we don't care about it. I'm saying let's just consciously look at it from a clever opinion, unbiased to your personal experience. And the answer is you can't. I can't do that, and I've been trying to do it for about 5 years. You can't do that, and you've never attempted to try and do it. That's how unconscious you are. Racism will only get solved when we realise that the unconscious idiots, the undereducated people who are truly racist, are projecting an uncomfortable pain and experience. And it's one that doesn't have to affect you. Like white chicks doesn't have to affect me. Like racism doesn't have to affect me. And this isn't from somebody who's saying that racism towards black people and Asian people and whatever race doesn't exist. This is saying I understand that it exists, and I'm now being suppressed because of my white so-called privileged upbringing, blinded to that biased opinion that it does exist, and I'm trying to deal with it. I'm trying to be honestly and open to people. Whereas what normally happens is, this is racist and I will never change my opinion on that. Okay, so what would you like to happen? For white privileged people to be suppressed like we was for 300 years. That would be fair. Okay, so that makes you racist. And these people aren't aware that they're doing this because they're biased. They are in their own little group of people with their own little beliefs, and that's all that they believe, and if no one else believes it, you might as well kill them. And this isn't the way forward. Unconscious acting, reacting is not going to help or solve racism ever.